And I'm finally now to the point where I can walk pretty consistently every day for 20 minutes. And I know that sounds like nothing, but it's huge, huge. Hi, my name's Diane. I live in Longwood, Florida. My passion has always been in sales. Like since I was, 5 years old, I was selling, the chocolates at school and so on and so forth. And then I got into my 20s and started getting really sick. Probably started getting sick in my teens, really noticing it. I was sick earlier, starting with at 5, had my tonsils taken out, and then had anxiety as, a young child. But you kind of get through things easier when you're younger. Started hitting me a lot harder in my teens, early 20s, really started getting sick and having some negative impacts. So that brought me to, I actually went to school to become a holistic health counselor, only to find answers for myself. Then I did that for probably 10 years and I couldn't help myself. I was doing everything under the sun from, you know, coffee enemas, supplements galore. I can't even begin to tell you because I was diagnosed in my probably late 30s with Lyme's disease. And then I started doing, I'm trying to think of there's one that is it's the most non-alternative thing that I did where they take blood, they send it to a lab in Greece, they make something that is supposed to attack just the Lyme, and then they send it back and put it back into you. Did that twice. I did everything outside of antibiotics and going, quote unquote, what traditional medicine says to do. I just knew that that was not the right thing to do, but I couldn't fix myself. I couldn't get better. I would get somewhat better, but I couldn't get better. And heat lamps, the red infrared lamps, I couldn't do saunas. I couldn't do anything hot because I would get so sick so easily. So I wouldn't say my passion is health, but my sickness has caused me to have to kind of make it my passion. So that was a long answer for a short question. I have kind of a person that has also struggled with health issues. The interesting thing is her and I are night and day different. Hers is mainly, it does trickle down to physical, but hers is mainly mental. Depression, just a lot of, the mental side of it. I do have the mental side as far as anxiety goes, severe anxiety in my life, but mine is more physical. So she's been struggling and we've been kind of walking hand in hand through everything for probably 15 years. And she is the one that found ZenCleanz. And when she told me about it, I was like, oh, yeah, another thing. You just get so tired of trying thing after thing after thing after thing and nothing. Each time, I would say 15 years ago probably 15, maybe more years ago is when I really started doing coffee enemas. And I thought, okay, they made me really sick, but I thought this is going to be the thing. And I was pumped up and excited. And I thought, if I can do this for 2 years and then be okay, I can do it. And, and everything that I did, I'd be like, okay, I can do it for a year. And then I'll, but a year would come and go and I still wasn't, maybe I was making incremental, better. I was making incremental better because I was so sick with Lyme disease when I got diagnosed, I couldn't get out of bed for a good year and a half. Few times I said goodbye to my kids when they were in grade school and I didn't think that I would be there. Not that I'm saying that I was going to die, but I thought I was going to be at the hospital by the time they got home from school. Just so sick. I remember at the holidays, I couldn't even sit at the table. Don't even think about that. Obviously I couldn't cook. I couldn't stand, but I couldn't even sit at the table with them because I couldn't hold myself up. I was so weak. My heart rate was going from when I'd wake up in the morning, I wouldn't even put my feet on the floor. I would just sit up and my heart rate would go to like 140. I, I was I was so sick. I would go to the doctor. They were like, you could have a heart attack any day. They scared me. One time I did take a beta blocker, a half of a beta blocker, was up all night. Like it almost killed me. It was just so bad, so bad. Anyways, so I was getting incremental better, but I was never getting better. Anyways, so she introduced me to this. I said fine, very reluctantly, but I did finally, and that was probably maybe 6 to 8 months ago is when I was introduced to ZenCleanz. There was no doubt that I just knew that I needed to clean out my intestinal tract, and I did, see about it was one of the interviews that I saw, and it was a gentleman, and he said that like buckets and buckets came out. And I was like, I know I need that. Like, I just know that I need that. So that kind of got me inspired to try it or whatever. I didn't have buckets. I did have a lot, but it wasn't buckets. I did have mucoid plaque. Again, not like the ropes and ropes that other people would ever, but I did have it. And I did doubt, just like a lot of people do, of, oh, it's just the product. Oh, it's whatever. Now I've done 2 rainbow cleanses so far. It's not the product. You have to experience it yourself to really see. The thing that really flipped me was when you do the liver cleanse. I never had the guts to do other liver cleanses with the salt and whatever. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. Anyways, ZenCleanz is so easy. Like, it doesn't taste bad. It's just so easy. And I got very easily 100 stones out the first time. Like, and it's not that you literally count, but it's so easy to, like, you kind of can group them in like groups of 10, and you can easily do like, okay, 10, 10, 10, so easily there was 100 stones. But again, I still doubted, is it just, the oil kind of congealing or whatever. But then I did a second one, and the second one again got like over 100 stones out. And they were different. They were different size. They were different colors. So that's when I was really like, okay, this is not the product. This is what's coming out. And then I realized that back when I had my daughter, and I had my first gallbladder attack when I was 8 months pregnant. And of course, they sent me to the hospital. And they put me on the monitor, and they were like, you're not in labor. And I was like, I knew I wasn't in labor. The pain was, up top, wasn't down the bottom, whatever. And the nurse, they tell you so much without even testing. And they were like, she said, I'm pretty sure it's your gallbladder, but there's nothing we can do now. Anyways, a month after my daughter was born, or 2 months after she was born, had my second attack, ended up in the emergency room. Long story short, they did do a sonogram, and I said to the technician, I was like, do you see stones? Like, how many stones are there? And she just looked at me and she was like, too many to count. Let's put it that way. And I was like, okay, again, knowing nothing about this. About, a week later, had my gallbladder taken out. And I didn't put it together until ZenCleanz that, wait a minute, if my gallbladder had that many stones that they couldn't count them. This is me saying this. This is not science. This is not anything. This is just what I put together. I feel very confident that my liver has probably literally thousands of stones. Thousands. The first 2, at least 100 each on each one. So I know that I need to do at least whatever. How many ever? Many, many, many of those. But here's why I'm comfortable in saying that I want to do it, I need to do it, or whatever, because the difference in how I feel after 2, just 2, I'm like, I told everybody, years ago. I was like, when I start exercising again, because I was always an avid going to the gym, exercising, whatever. I haven't been able to do that in at least 30, 40 years. And I said, when you see me regularly walking, exercising, whatever, that's when you know I'm getting better. And I'm finally now to the point where I can walk pretty consistently every day for 20 minutes. And I know that sounds like nothing, but it's huge, huge, so that's how I know that these cleanses, they're not just temporary, these are working. So, my girls were in their elementary, like 4th, 5th grade, and they're now 27 and 29. So 20 years ago, my adrenals were so shot. I was taking so much adrenal supplements. I was struggling so bad, and all the recommendations of, you've got to rest more, you've got to stop more, you've got to, I can't tell you how many times I was told to rest. You just know what's not working, but I didn't know what to do. And I agree, everything happens the way it's supposed to, when it's supposed to happen, and all that. But I've done so many things. The only thing I can say is ZenCleanz it's everything. It's not just that it detoxes you or that it takes the stones out. At the same time, it's supporting you. So I didn't have, with the coffee enemas, where it literally wiped me out. Like I couldn't function. This doesn't do that to me. Like when I was doing the rainbow cleanse, I was so scared because I can't do cleanses. I can't do not eating. I cannot. I was on such a high protein diet because it took that to allow me to function. And when I did the rainbow cleanse and I was like on day 3 or 4, and I was like, oh my God, I actually feel better. Like I feel I have energy, I can function. I'm like, I was shocked, but it makes sense because all of the nutrients that are in the drinks or whatever. So since then, I've not ever went a day without taking at minimum 30 to 60 milliliters of the liquid enzymes. And I do different ones, I think they all, well, I know they all do different functions, and I'm sure that my body needs all of them at, some point. So I do, all the different ones. I never open more than 2 bottles at a time just because, you want to use them within a certain, kind of time period or whatever. So, but I stay on them because they're amazing. I mean, they're just amazing. I wish I would have written it down. Probably don't really want to know, but I honestly have probably spent, and I'm not exaggerating at all, $750,000 on alternative therapies. I went to almost every alternative doctor in my area. I've looked at, going to other states. I looked at those clinics where you're supposed to go for like 6 weeks, costs like 30,000, 40,000. Thank goodness I never did that, where they just run you through the gamut of things. I don't know if they wouldn't have just absolutely killed me. About 4 or 5 years ago, right over my liver, my right side started aching. Wasn't pain. It was literally an ache. A couple of times it woke me up out of a dead sleep because it just ached so much. Sometimes it wouldn't be there, but 80% of the time it was an annoyance. And I would wake up in the morning, that was always the worst, and it would feel like someone had put a really tight rubber band completely around my middle section, and it would just be an annoyance. And when I would get up out of bed and start moving around a little bit or whatever, it would help it to loosen that band, quote unquote, that feeling. So I did. I went to a doctor because I was like, I don't know what this is. After a year or two of dealing with it, I'm like, okay, so of course they manipulate, they do everything. They run blood work, they did a sonogram, zero answers, nothing. Another thing was my red blood cell count was high, so they had me go and donate blood. My cholesterol has always been like really high, like high 300s. My triglycerides were in the high 300s. My cholesterol was always well over 200. But again, I just never felt like the right thing was to take cholesterol lowering medicine so I never did. Of course, I did all the supplements, the fish oil, whatever, couldn't get it down. So now fast forward to ZenCleanz, my liver was full of stones, like full. So 2 forgive cleanses, liver cleanses, and that feeling gone. 4 to 5 years of this uncomfortable whatever, and that's only after 2. So yes, I'm very incentivized to keep going, because if I had that many in my gallbladder 35 years ago, can you imagine how many stones are in my liver? Like, it makes total sense why I was always hypersensitive to any medications that I took, and I'm talking like cold medicines or antibiotics when I was in my 20s, when I was not smart enough to not go to doctors, and they would make me throw up, and I was so hypersensitive to anything. I couldn't drink. I would try just for enjoyment purposes, couldn't drink alcohol, very sensitive to sugar, very sensitive to everything. Well, because my liver is so packed full, it couldn't filter anything. So made sense. Well, let me give you one other example. Again, I've got the personality that I'm going to die, walking down the street. I'm not going to lay in bed. I can't. I just can't. I'll go out of my mind. I have to keep pushing through or whatever. So I started working, long story short, I was always owned my own business, got divorced 5 years ago, sorry. And the business we own, my husband got that. I got other stuff. So I didn't have anything. So I started working for the first time in 30 years for someone else. My husband had to help me and do my job. And there's a little bit of history as to why he could do that, because I was in bed for at least 2, 3, 4 hours a day, some days all day long, couldn't get out of bed. I started the first year or 2, most of my job laying in bed on the computer when I could. And if I couldn't, then he would take care of, what needed to be taken care of or whatever. But laying in bed most of the time for the last 4 or 5 years, working, to where now I almost never have to lay in bed. Like, never, pretty much. So huge difference in 4 to 5 years. Yeah. Oh, life. I can live now. I can travel so much more. It's not perfect. And I don't want to make this out to be like, oh, it's a magic pill and you take it once and everything is rainbows and unicorns. No, there are still times where I can get knocked down to bringing me back to as bad as I was. But it's a much, 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 much shorter span of time, where I would say 90% of my life was bad back then, to where now I just have pure short stints where it gets bad, because my liver's still full. Like, I still have a lot of, cleansing that I want to do to get to, I want to feel amazing. And I know now, I feel better now than I did in my 20s and 30s and even in my teens. And I know that as I continue with ZenCleanz, I'm going to feel better in my late 50s and 60s than I pretty much have my entire life. And if you know anything about the liver, you know that anger is the emotion of the liver. So for me, again, depression was never my issue. Anxiety and anger were my two issues. The decrease in anxiety, I can remember when I was in a bad time of anxiety, and a bad time is where you are functioning all day, every day in a state of anxiety. And I would have, and this is years ago, I would have little tiny glimpses where, and I can even remember like the vehicle I was driving, the road I was on, whatever, to where I was like, I feel normal. To feel normal was amazing. I wasn't feeling like, but I felt normal. And now I feel normal 90% of the time. I do have, again, those short stints where I do have, the anxiety, and the same thing with the anger. It was a common feeling, and it caused obviously problems in, I am remarried, and problems in my marriage, and you know my thank God my kids are as wonderful as they are. They just have accepted that its mom was sick, and so she was short. And I would try to overcompensate by, please, I'm sorry, I don't mean it. I love you. I love you. And, and they were very understanding. So the anger and the anxiety, two huge things where they were 90% of my life, and now they're, 10 to 20% of my life.